Please like my videos and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hook. Last July, in a small Airbnb outside Flagstaff, Arizona, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of someone slowly tapping on the bedroom window. I told myself it was just a tree branch in the wind. It wasn't. Setup. I'm a 27-year-old grad student, and last summer I drove cross-country for a research trip. I booked cheap Airbnbs along the way, and one of them was a rustic guest house on the edge of Flagstaff. The listing looked cozy, wood paneling, mountain views, and way cheaper than a hotel. The host said he lived in a separate cabin about half an hour away, so I'd have the place to myself. The road leading up was dirt and gravel, and cell service cut out about 5 miles before I got there. Inside, the house felt isolated. 2 bedrooms, a creaky staircase, and a huge backyard that faded into dark forest. First anomaly. The first night, around 11 p.m., I was unpacking when I heard a faint creak downstairs, like someone stepping on the old wood floor. My heart jumped, but when I checked, no one was there. I told myself it was just the house settling. The listing even warned that the place was quirky and made noises. I locked the doors, pulled the curtains, and went back upstairs. The next night at 3 a.m., I woke up to a louder sound, not the house creaking. 3 slow taps against the window right by my bed. When I opened my eyes, the curtains swayed slightly, like someone had brushed them. I forced myself to look. Nothing. But when I turned on the lamp, I noticed something strange outside in the dirt below. A footprint, bare, pointing directly at my window. I stepped back, convinced it was just some local messing with me, and tried to go back to sleep. At exactly 3:12 a.m. the following night, the sound returned, but worse. This time, the taps became a slow scrape along the glass, like a fingernail dragging. My skin crawled. I sat frozen in bed when I heard it. A low whistle, drawn out, like someone trying to get my attention. I whispered, "Hello?" and instantly regretted it, because the whistle stopped, and then the doorknob to the upstairs bedroom clicked. Just once. Testing it. Confrontation/near contact. I grabbed a heavy lamp and crept to the door, shaking. My hand hovered over the knob. I forced myself to yank it open, thinking maybe I'd scare them off. But the hallway was dark, silent. Then I glanced down the staircase. At the bottom, just in a spill of moonlight from a window, stood a figure, perfectly still, head tilted back like they were staring straight up at me. My eyes locked on one detail that burns in my memory. They were holding something shiny in one hand, dangling loosely. I couldn't tell if it was a knife or keys. Break in safety plan. I bolted back into the room, slammed the door, and shoved the dresser in front of it. My hands shook as I tried to dial 911, but of course, no service. Desperate, I used the Airbnb app to message the host through the Wi-Fi. He replied 15 minutes later. No one should be there. Lock the doors. I'm calling the sheriff. When the deputies arrived nearly an hour later, they found nothing. No figure, no footprints this time. But here's the part that unsettled me most. The Wi-Fi router had been unplugged. Break in safety plan. I bolted back into the room, slammed the door, and shoved the dresser in front of it. My hands shook as I tried to dial 911, but of course, no service. Desperate, I used the Airbnb app to message the host through the Wi-Fi. He replied 15 minutes later. No one should be there. Lock the doors. I'm calling the sheriff. When the deputies arrived nearly an hour later, they found nothing. No figure, no footprints this time. But here's the part that unsettled me most. The Wi-Fi router had been unplugged. Aftermath plus 2 theories. I left that Airbnb the next morning without finishing my booking. The sheriff said it was probably a trespasser or drifter from the forest. Someone looking to scare or rob me. That's the easy explanation. But the other part, the figure never tried to break in fully. They just stood there, watching, and when I replay in my head, I swear the object in their hand wasn't a weapon. It looked more like a set of old, rusted keys, maybe to the house. Stinger. 2 weeks later, I checked my Airbnb messages again. A new one popped up from the same host. Hey, just curious. Did you leave the keys on the upstairs dresser? Found them there after you checked out. Hooked. Back in March, during a weekend trip to New Orleans, I booked an old Airbnb townhouse. The first night, at 1:47 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a door unlocking somewhere inside. I told myself it was just the pipes settling. It wasn't. Setup. I'm 33, and I was in New Orleans for a friend's wedding. Hotels near the French Quarter were insanely expensive, so I booked a cheap Airbnb about 10 minutes away. The place was a tall, narrow townhouse. Creaky floors, exposed brick walls, and big shuttered windows. The listing said the host lived out of state and used a local cleaner between guests. The downstairs had a locked storage room with a heavy padlock. I assumed it was just where they kept supplies. My room was upstairs, and the Wi-Fi barely reached that far. Still, it felt fine. At first anomaly. On my first night, around midnight, I was brushing my teeth when I heard a faint knock. 3 little taps from that locked storage room downstairs. I froze, then laughed it off. Old houses make noise. Pipes would, maybe a rat. I went upstairs, locked my door, and put in earbuds. The next night, at exactly 1:47 a.m., I woke up to something sharper. A metallic click, like the sound of a key turning a lock. I sat up in bed, heart racing. I listened hard, then heard slow, deliberate footsteps across the downstairs floorboards. I told myself maybe the cleaner had come late at night. But who cleans at 2 a.m.? The footsteps stopped directly under my room. Then silence. On the third night, it got worse. Again at 1:47 a.m. I was awake this time, waiting. The metallic click came again, but this time I heard the padlock actually drop against the wooden door. My chest tightened. Then came the slow creak of that storage room door swinging open. I didn't move. A minute later, the sound of climbing, footsteps, heavy and dragging, moving up the staircase. Every step groaned. Whoever it was, they stopped outside my bedroom door. And then the knob turned. Confrontation/near contact. I had pushed a chair under the handle before bed. And thank God I did. The knob twisted. The chair jolted. And the door shook against the frame. Whoever was on the other side didn't say a word. They just leaned their weight against the door, testing it. Then, after what felt like forever, pressure stopped. I forced myself to check the gap under the door. In the faint glow of moonlight through shutters, I saw 2 feet, bare, dirty, standing motionless outside my room. Brake and safety plan. I panicked, grabbed my phone, and called 911. The signal was weak, but the dispatcher heard me and sent a unit. It took nearly 20 minutes before I heard the sirens. By the time the police arrived, the hallway outside was empty. They searched the place top to bottom, even opened the storage room. It was bare inside, just concrete floors and dust. No one, no footprints. But here's the strangest part. The padlock wasn't broken. It was locked again, hanging in place. Aftermath plus 2 theories. I checked out the next morning and booked a hotel. The police said maybe a previous tenant still had a copy of the key. That's the normal answer. But I keep going back to those bare, motionless feet outside my door. Whoever it was didn't try to hide. They just stood there like they were waiting for me to open the door. Stinger. 2 weeks later, while cleaning out my luggage, I found something in the side pocket I never put there. A single rusty padlock key. Hooked. Last July in Vermont, I rented a cozy-looking Airbnb cabin. At 3:09 a.m. the first night, I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on the attic window. I told myself it had to be a branch. It wasn't. Set up. I'm 27, and I had taken a solo weekend trip to Vermont to decompress after a brutal work quarter. The Airbnb was a small A-frame cabin tucked back in the woods, about 15 minutes from town. No neighbors in sight, just trees. The listing mentioned an unusable attic space, but didn't list it in the photos. When I got there, I noticed the attic window faced directly over my bedroom, like a single square eye watching. The Wi-Fi was almost non-existent, and self-service barely worked unless I walked down the driveway. First anomaly. That first night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a tap, tap, tap. I sat up, thinking it was rain. But when I listened closely, it wasn't random. It was spaced out deliberate, 3 knocks. I figured maybe a tree branch was brushing against the attic window. I went back to sleep, telling myself I was just imagining things. The second night, at almost the exact same time, 3:09 a.m., I woke up again. This time the sound was louder. 4 knocks, steady, against glass. I turned on my flashlight and stared up. The attic window was small and square, but I swear I saw a pale shape move behind it, like someone ducking away from the light. My chest tightened. I climbed halfway up the ladder to the attic hatch, but it was nailed shut from the outside. No way in, no way out. Still, I didn't sleep the rest of the night. On the third night, I was too wired to sleep. At exactly 3:09 a.m., I aimed my phone at the attic window, recording. The knock came again, clear and sharp. But when I zoomed in, I caught something I'll never forget. The faint outline of a hand pressed flat against the glass. A second later, another hand joined it. Then, just before I dropped the phone, a face leaned into view, pale, expressionless, staring down. Confrontation/near contact. I scrambled out of bed and ran outside, shining my flashlight up at the attic. My blood went cold. The window was wide open, swaying in the night breeze. I sprinted back in, locked my bedroom door, and sat shaking with a kitchen knife until dawn. Break and safety plan. I called the Airbnb host the next morning. They swore no one else had access and said the attic was permanently sealed. I showed them my recording, but when I replayed it, the video was corrupted. Just static where the attic window should have been. They told me I must have dreamed it, even though I was holding the phone in my hand. Aftermath plus 2 theories. The rational side says maybe some trespasser was sneaking in through the attic, though I don't know how they kept getting it nailed shut again by morning. The other theory, the one that still makes me check my ceiling at night, is that the attic was never empty. That face at the glass wasn't trying to get in. It was trying to get out. Stinger. A month later, the Airbnb listing disappeared. When I looked up the address again, the property photo was just a cabin, with the attic window blacked out. Hook. Last November, I booked a farmhouse Airbnb in rural Kentucky. The host told me, "Don't open the basement door, it's just storage." At 2:30 a.m. on my second night, I heard something moving down there. Setup. I'm 32, and I had driven to Kentucky for a weekend writing retreat. I wanted peace and quiet, and this Airbnb was perfect, or so I thought. It was a century-old farmhouse, isolated on a gravel road, with the nearest neighbor half a mile away. The hosts had been friendly, but when they handed me the keys, they pointed at a locked door in the kitchen and casually said, "That's just storage. Please don't mess with it." The house had creaky floors, no Wi-Fi, and the only cell service was if I stood by an upstairs window. First anomaly. The first night was uneventful, until around 2:30 a.m. when I woke to the sound of shuffling, slow footsteps directly beneath my room. My heart jumped, but then I realized my bedroom sat right over the basement. I laughed it off nervously, thinking it must be the old house settling, or maybe a raccoon trapped underneath. I forced myself back to sleep. The second night, at almost the same time, the noise returned. Except this time it wasn't footsteps. It was humming, a low, steady tune drifting up to the floorboards. I got up, crept downstairs, and stood in the kitchen, staring at that locked basement door. The humming stopped the second I touched the doorknob. I whispered, "Hello?" But no answer came. On the third night, I left my phone recording near the door before going to bed. At 2:30 a.m., I woke up to banging, 3 heavy thuds from beneath the floor. I froze in bed as the sound of fingernails scratching would follow. In the morning, I checked my phone. The recording had captured it all clearly. Shuffling, humming, and finally, a whisper. One word. "Let me out." Confrontation/near contact. That night, I couldn't resist. I decided to stay awake downstairs, sitting in the kitchen with every light on. At exactly 2:30, the humming started again, louder now. The basement door rattled hard, as if someone was pulling it from the other side. I grabbed a chair, heart pounding, ready to bolt. Then silence. Slowly, the knob began to turn. break and safety plan. I panicked and ran outside, calling 911. The deputies arrived 20 minutes later. They forced the basement door open. When they came back up, their faces were pale. "Basement's empty," one said. "Just dirt, old shelves, nothing unusual." I asked about the noises. They shrugged and told me old houses make sounds. But I noticed one thing before they left. The deputy had locked the basement door again behind him. Aftermath plus 2 theories. The safe answer is that it was just acoustics, animals, or maybe a prank by the host. But deep down, I can't shake the voice on my phone. The way it whispered directly into the mic part of me thinks whatever's down there isn't supposed to leave. And maybe the locked door wasn't for my protection. Stinger. When I checked the Airbnb listing a week later, the description had changed. The line about the basement now read, "Guests are not permitted downstairs for your safety." Hooked. In July, I rented an Airbnb apartment in downtown Chicago. On my very first night at 3:12 a.m., I heard someone whispering in the closet. I thought it was the neighbors through the walls. It wasn't. Setup. I'm 27, and I was in Chicago for a week-long work conference. Hotels near convention center were way too expensive, so I booked an Airbnb instead. The unit looked simple but decent. A one-bedroom apartment in an older brick building. Walking distance to downtown. The listing had plenty of good reviews, but it also mentioned thin walls. So I figure I'd probably hear the neighbors now and then. The host never met me in person. They left the keys in a lockbox and just texted me a quick, "Enjoy your stay." That alone made the place feel a little impersonal, but I shrugged it off. The apartment itself wasn't bad. A little dated. Peeling paint in the bathroom. A fridge that hummed too loudly, but clean. The bedroom had a queen bed against the far wall. And just a few feet away, a sliding closet door. Inside was an ironing board, extra pillows, and some random hangers. It was fine. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But being alone in a strange apartment in a city where I didn't know anyone, it already gave me a sense of unease. The Wi-Fi kept cutting out too, which only added to that disconnected, isolated feeling. First anomaly. That first night, after a long day of meetings, I collapsed into bed around midnight. Sometime after 3 a.m., I woke up to a noise. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, a faint murmur, like someone talking just beneath their breath. It was coming from the closet. I lay still, straining to hear. It was so soft I couldn't make out the words, just a low rise and fall of speech. I finally worked up the nerve, got out of bed, and slid open the closet door. Nothing, just spare bedding and shadows. The sound had stopped instantly, like it had never been there. My heart was pounding. But I told myself it was probably just voices carrying from another apartment. Thin walls, old building, late-night neighbors. It made sense. Or at least it did until the next night. On the second night, I left the TV on low volume to help me fall asleep. Around the same time, 3 to 3:15 a.m., I woke up again. The TV was still playing, but underneath it, I heard the same murmur, louder this time. I muted the TV. The whispering was definitely coming from inside the closet. I couldn't make out full sentences, but the tone was strange. Not angry, not casual, pleading, like someone begging in hushed tones. The closet door was closed, and I stared at it, frozen. After a few minutes, I forced myself to get up. My chest felt tight as I pushed my suitcase across the floor and wedged it in front of the closet door. Then I climbed back into bed, wide awake. I must have dozed off, because I jolted awake again around 4 a.m. This time, the sound was different. A scraping noise, low and steady. My suitcase was sliding across the hardwood floor, away from the closet door. By the third night, I was terrified but also desperate for answers. I decided to stay awake, phone in hand, recording just in case. At 3:12 a.m. exactly, the whispering started again. The voice was low, gravelly, like a man's. This time I caught it clearly on the recording. One phrase, repeated slowly. Still here, still here. The blood drained from my face. I yanked open the closet. Phone light on. No one was inside, but something was different. The ironing board, pillows, and hangers weren't where I'd seen them before. They'd been neatly stacked into the corner, almost as if someone had been clearing space to live there. I slammed the door shut and barely slept the rest of the night. Confrontation/near contact. On the fourth night, I didn't want to sleep at all. I sat in bed with the lamp on, trying to distract myself with my laptop. Around 3 a.m., I started to relax, thinking maybe nothing would happen. Then I heard it, the slow creak of the closet door sliding open on its own. I froze. The suitcase I had shoved there the night before wasn't in front of it anymore. I realized I'd forgotten to move it back. The door slid open halfway. Inside, it was just darkness, but in the dim light of the lamp, I could see the faint outline of a figure standing there, tall, shoulders hunched, head slightly tilted. I couldn't see a face, just the suggestion of someone being there. Before I could scream, the door slammed shut with a violent bang that shook the frame. That broke me. I grabbed my keys and ran into the hallway barefoot, brake and safety plan. I called 911 from the lobby, my voice shaking. Within 10 minutes, 2 officers arrived. They followed me back upstairs, unlocked the apartment, and checked every corner. The closet was empty, no figure, no stacked pillows, just the ordinary clutter. I told them about the whispering, the moving suitcase, the door slamming. One officer gave me a strange look, like I'd been imagining it, but the other one, he leaned close and said quietly, "You're not the first guest call about this unit." I asked what he meant, but he just shook his head and told me to find another place for the night. Aftermath plus 2 theories. The rational explanation is simple. Maybe someone had a copy of the key and was messing with me. Someone could have been slipping in during the day, hiding, moving things around. Chicago isn't the safest place in the world, and stranger break-ins do happen. But here's what I can't explain. The recording on my phone, the deep voice saying, "Still here." The way objects were rearranged in the closet when no one was inside, and the figure I swear I saw standing there in the shadows. Some people say buildings hold on to their tenants, even after they're gone. Stinger, when I checked my phone later, the recording was still there. At the very end of the clip, after the whisper, there was a new sound, softer, closer. The faint creak of the closet door opening, and then a single quiet laugh. Please like my videos and subscribe to my YouTube channel.